Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. We are about to kick off with this session, this connected conversation brought to you by UNICEF Innovation Nodes on innovative business models for sustainable development. I'll wait for a few more minutes to get up to just after the scheduled start time and look forward to, as we see people streaming in. We have looked at all the questions that were posed by all of you. I think about 150 ideas came in for what your expectations for this session were, and delighted to share that I think we will be meeting and hopefully do our best to exceed your expectations from the session. So definitely we'll be talking about practical, real experience in considering business models. We'll be looking at how people have actually made that journey successfully and what we can all learn from those experiences. We'll be learning more about what's at the cutting edge state of knowledge around business models in our particular sector. We did receive one or two questions and that will probably be out of scope. So no, there is not going to be a large focus on artificial intelligence in this session. We'll point you to one or two other sessions that will be coming up in future that you may find really interesting. We'll wait for about just one more minute. You can see people streaming in, and then we will kick off. But warmly welcome. We also want to point out to you that there is a Q&A button. It should be at the top of your screen, and we will be monitoring that and looking to answer your questions. So please use that to add in any question that you have as the sessions run through. We'll be hearing from all of the people that you see on your screen. As the questions occur to you, please put them in the Q&A. We'll be answering them there's a special dedicated Q&A session at the end of this hearing from our different panelists and speakers, and we'll be answering questions actually after each speaker's session. So multiple opportunities. We'll also be answering them via text in the Q&A, so please keep those Q&A questions coming. We're going to do absolutely everything we can do to answer them or to point you to other resources and opportunities to get those answered. All right, so we have lots to share, and I think it's time for us to kick off. Also, if you find this session to be really valuable, thank you for also registering. One of the things that come as a benefit from that is, I know a couple of questions asked us, are there going to be practical tools, things that can help me make my own journey and lead me through an understanding of business models? And in fact, there are. We will get back to you with a link to this recording as well as other resources. In the next month or two, UNICEF's Innovation Nodes will be releasing a business model toolkit that really has resources for thinking through some of the choices that face us as we look beyond grants. So this really is a session to learn from others who have already taken the initiative and already transitioned to different models. In today's development sector, where funding is volatile, this becomes a even more existential question. What is your business model if it isn't one that is going to be about perpetual grant funding? So terrific. Let's kick it off with sharing with you the answer to one of a few of your questions, which is, what are innovation nodes? And we zip to our next slide. So the Innovation Nodes team, going back one slide, is a team in UNICEF that really focuses on what is possibility-led. And so we really not only bring together multiple disciplines, or we actually work in a completely transdisciplinary way. So today's session, you'll see and hear a lot from our valued collaborators in the business school space. But in fact, there is work and research that have been contributing to what you'll learn today and come from transdisciplinary schools, meaning you've had students and researchers who are in vastly different areas outside of business alone. So people who are working on arts, on forensic science, who are working in biotech, working in pre-med classes. And it's really the best of that kind of diversity of thinking that we brought together with the preeminent organizations that you'll be hearing more about. So the Innovation Nodes team inside UNICEF's Office of Innovation designs these collaborative relationships with preeminent organizations that bring these kinds of expertise. And we really focus on trying to understand areas that are not core and they do not already have a lot of attention and focus on them in order to unlock and understand what their potential is for children. And we do look at areas like, you'll see, next generation materials and precision health and renewable energy. And yes, somebody asked us, are you going to be doing something on additive manufacturing? And I'd love to use this opportunity to point out that in in probably 6 or so weeks, we hope to be inviting you and many others to a session that will focus on the potential that can be unlocked through additive manufacturing. And in fact, there is in itself from that work a very different business model that has opened our eyes to what you look at when you go beyond thinking about large scope things, but actually changing your mindset around what scale looks like. But today we're focusing on an approach which is around our new and emerging business models. So what do we really kind of mean when we think about business models? And what is it and why is it kind of important? So business models are really a kind of a way of thinking around how, we deliver and create kind of value. And why does this really matter? It matters because business models are exceptionally important in shaping the outcomes and the results. And you'll hear today from our very next speaker around how a business model can either be restricting or expansive, and what happens when you do think differently from the traditional way of thinking. And it really can unlock results at scale. It can unlock and influence impact. And it absolutely, in terms of different business models, emphasizes what sustainability means. And today, when we use that term sustainability, we're not only talking about the SDGs, we're not only talking, about all things green and environmentally friendly. We are primarily talking about financial sustainability of either an entity or a business or an initiative or an innovation. So I think important because there's many different meanings when people hear the word business model. If we go to the next slide, what are we going to use as kind of a reference point? I think many people may be familiar with this Nicholas Osterwalder's business model canvas. There are different versions of it that have been redesigned for example, the social impact space. And it is, and we'll hear much more from Jacqueline a professor at the University of New South Wales, really taking this idea much further. It's around how we create value, how you deliver value, and how you capture this. And you'll this will be a kind of a thread that you'll see us coming back to over the different speakers, and especially as we capstone this with Jacqueline and team's insights. And if we move on to, what does it mean in social impact? I think one of the most important things that Arya Nufrikri will run through with us is the findings from fundamental work that we did with the Australian National University, which was to understand how much does the world actually understand, have researched, have evidenced around business models for social impact. So business models in the development and social sectors, because it was our sort of starting hypothesis that maybe not that much has been done in the space, and the focus has been primarily in the private sector and for-profit space. And in fact, that is true. And what you'll see is it's really quite the challenge about how you balance between delivering social goals and social impact and needing to remain, financially sustainable and to have some sorts of financial goals. And those aren't necessarily around profit, but they are around sustainability. So these really are those two balances on the scale, essentially, that any entity moving out of just being, grant funded, where you're limited by, how much and how effectively can you be in fundraising and in bringing in more grants, into looking at a lot of different ways of addressing financial sustainability. And to unpack that a little bit more, what are we going to focus on? So you've heard me just talk about that fundamental piece of work, and that is the current state of knowledge. So we are going to talk a little bit about this now. The piece that I've just mentioned around, how do you improve your current an existing business model if it is grant funded or otherwise? These, are sorts of some of the things you might be looking at in terms of how to improve revenue, how to be more effective and use fundraising innovation, how to operate in a more enhanced way by reducing costs and look at, different types of cost efficiencies, or how to expand, your product or service to reach more users. We're not looking at business model optimization. Neither are we looking at financing model innovation. And I know a few people had this as a question, which was, are you going to kind of talk about innovative finance? And we are not going to be covering that because that's really an innovation on the financing model as opposed to the funding model. And those includes things as you sort of see here, blended finance, social impact bonds, etc. What we are focusing on, though, is the piece in the middle, which is fundamentally, what is your business model? What are you actually, what you have as your foundational way of operating your business? So really, it's around exploring and designing alternative models that may be more financially sustainable or mission aligned. The three that you see highlighted, social enterprise, government integration, and social purpose ventures, those are the three that we're going to focus on and really learn from the wonderful experience of our speakers. There are others that we have experience with and that we've been examining that you can see examples of below. The last one, economies of scope versus economies of scale. That is an interesting model we'll be unpacking further when we talk about additive manufacturing in our future connected conversation. But today, we're really focused on what do we currently know, where are the gaps, and what can we learn from people who've already been successful in shifting to a different business model. So with that, let's move on to that next area of knowledge. So we were very pleased to be able to collaborate with the Australian National University's Business School, and they really helped us interrogate our initial exploration and kind of hypothesis and help us understand where are there significant gaps in understanding the business models that exist and aspects about them in the social impact area. So our insight analyst, Arya Nufikri, is going to take us through ANU's the team's scoping reviews. Over to you, Arya.
Thank you, Tanya, and good morning or good evening to wherever you are right now, because we have audiences from all over the globe. So as Tanya mentioned, we had an amazing opportunity to actually collaborate with Professor Brigitte Muscat and her team from ANU to explore this topic. So what we envision is that the result of this collaboration will result in the key framework that will shape our approach in exploring this topic further. And you will see the further exploration from the amazing panelists that we have tonight. So the key question that we come up for them is how to innovate business models to create social impact with financial sustainability. And they came back to us by breaking down those questions into their key research question, which is, what does the current literature say about business model innovation? What are the elements that are relevant for social impact and financial outcomes when it comes to the business models? And third, how does these elements evolve through time as reflected in the existing knowledge base about business model that is in papers, journals, and things that you might find researching about this topic? So the team decided to explore a research that is called a scoping review, which is basically mean mapping key concepts or evidence to demonstrate the breadth and depth of a field, which, as you can see, they have broken down this research approach into several steps. To do this, the first thing that they do is they comb literally thousands of papers. And from that thousands of paper, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 1,700 papers. They winnow it down to 56 papers that are the most relevant in this topic. From these selected papers, they then map out what are the keywords that keeps popping up in these papers, what are the elements and the themes that they discuss, and how the discussion of each theme evolved throughout the year. As you can see in the slide, you can see the keyword cloud. You can see how each topic kind of evolve, talking about the same thing but using different keyword throughout the year from 2015 to 2024, because the scoping review has been completed at the beginning of this year. So after they conducted that, they came up with all of these clusters of themes that, if you can see, it's actually the grid is based on how well developed is a topic and how relevant it is to the discussion. And after combing through all of this paper, they came up with the summary of what does the existing literature available says on business model innovation for social impact. So bear in mind, the next slide is going to be a bit wordy, but I'm going to kind of give you the high-level summary of everything. But basically, the first finding that they say, and this is reflected by the upcoming presentation by our speakers, is that business model innovation can actually occur at multiple levels, which offers diverse path for improved outcomes. It could be innovation happening at the entire model or only at the specific part of the model. As you can see, the Osterwalder canvas, there are different elements to business models, and there are different ways for people to actually create innovation within this canvas. It could be like wholesale, or it could be only on certain parts of it. The second key findings is that value proposition and core activities that drives value need to be the center of attention in planning for innovation. And especially for the context of social impact, strategic partnership are essential, and financial management is critical for effective value capture. In a sense, if you wanted to make sure that sustainability is achieved, financial management needs to be the utmost priority. However, we started seeing the challenge in the following findings, in which it says that the effective management for revenue and cost is critical. However, it is difficult in social sector, especially when it comes to revenue generation. Even though literature suggests that there are many ways that people could rethink traditional revenue model when it comes to achieving social impact, like diversification in commercial and social streams, exploring overlooked customer needs, or entering new industry or market. Anyway, there's a lot of possibilities where people could think about getting revenue. However, it is challenging in the social sector. And the reality is, despite the importance of the previous points, there is limited insight into financial sustainability at organization and innovation activity level for social impact, because most of the research about business model focused on the for-profit model for now. So for us, this is not actually a challenge or something scary, but it actually reveals to us several pathways that we can explore in the future research that needs to be done, so that we can have a deeper understanding of how organization can simultaneously achieve financial sustainability, scalability, and social impact. And what does these three terms actually mean will be discussed more with our upcoming experts. So based on this conclusion, we believe today's discussion is a great starting point of exploration, as we will hear about real case studies where different innovative business models has been successfully applied in the social impact context. So with that, I will hand the session back to Tanya, who will introduce our expert with these case studies. Back to you, Tanya.
Thanks so much, Arya. And I think, we were really happy to know that our kind of curiosity, was really qualified by people who have expertise and knowledge in the space to say, this is really worth knowing more about. And the time that you're taking to kind of catalyze this thinking and pulling together real experience, so the really practiced, learned experience of success and struggle is worth it, because there's a whole gap of knowledge. And I think and I know there's a whole range of people on the session who are in the private sector and others that are in the public sector too. And there's so much that is learned and documented and focused on in for-profit areas, that this work that we've just started and hopefully will inspire others is really worth doing. I think more worth doing in the time of volatile aid funding than ever before. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Marianne Bitar, the founder and CEO of BOT. Now, many people have heard about BOT because of the outstanding results it has delivered in terms of empowering young people and women in economic ways and other spheres, and around the impact sourcing that they've driven through high quality digital services provided by a highly skilled workforce from marginalized communities in Lebanon. But today we're focusing on an equally impressive and innovative story. It's a story less told, but you'll hear it directly from Marianne. It's really around how the UNICEF Lebanon team, and you can see the names of the colleagues here who deserve a really special shout out. And she, as the founder, saw and seized the opportunity to evolve the business model from one that was a traditionally grant-funded initiative to something that is a much more successful, socially oriented enterprise, and today has broader reach and even more impactful results than ever before. So, Marianne, over to you.
Thank you, Tanya, and thanks as well, Arya, because the discussion started with you. And a very, very big thank you, a very deep, genuine thank you to the UNICEF Lebanon team who encouraged me to join this wild ride, Tamara and Amal and Jessica. There was a passion in their hearts, there was a commitment, and we are all here because of them, because of their innovation and of definitely craziness in terms of implementing a development entrepreneur project that we never expected would lead to a sustainable social enterprise. So thanks a lot to the whole team for that. I'll introduce very briefly BOT, and I believe, Tanya, you have some questions for me and as well as the audience. So BOT stands for Bridge, Outsource, Transform. We are a social enterprise that bridge talents coming from youth and women, digitally trained by organizations in this specific case. In this specific case, it's Digital Opportunities Trust that trains using grant funding projects from UNICEF. They train NGO youth on digital skills, and eventually they join our platform as a workforce. And what we do, we sell data services to clients. And clients come from the private sector, public sector, or development agencies. The type of data we offer is mainly data collection and cleaning and data entry, data management, data analysis with platform the development. And we recently ventured into artificial intelligence data training. So how it all started, it started with a crazy idea in 2018. Arya, please, the next slide. I've been in the humanitarian field since 2003. I've been working in the NGO sector, working on fundraising, implementing development projects that could be sustainable from an outcome level, from an impact level, but not from a feasibility level. And then in 2018, we started our partnership with UNICEF Lebanon as an NGO, a Canadian NGO called DOT, Digital Opportunity Trust. And then during this partnership, the Lebanon team, Amal and Tamara, said, well, let's do something to this country. I mean, we have so many organizations and funding, training youth, and then we're stuck. Our youth and women are stuck, and we want to really bridge this digital divide gap. Let's try to see if we can innovate and create a social enterprise that has as a social cause creating livelihood opportunities for a trained workforce and working on a product development journey that would eventually lead to a sustainable business. And they were crazy. I was crazy back then as well. And we decided to venture together into this idea that was tested. And then based on the testing, we established the organization in 2019. We registered it as we don't have yet the social enterprise framework in Lebanon. So we had to register it as a for-profit company. And then UNICEF supported us for 2 years through a grant funding. but they launched the idea and then they started exiting. So reducing and putting pressure on us, reducing the percentage of grant income and putting pressure on us to increase the percentage of sales revenue. And then in 2022, UNICEF stepped out, and we were 75 to 80% self-funded from sales, from revenue generated from clients. And we still was dependent on small impact source funding, such as Al Fanar Foundation, Expo Dubai, EBRD, etc. We also need to consider that we started in 2019, where the economic crisis started in Lebanon. So as a Lebanese startup, we really were challenged with so many innovative national crises, from the economic crisis to the explosion of the port, to COVID, to the recent war. So we've always been bombarded by a situation where we had to think innovatively and try to rise from the crisis and manage with all the challenges that any entrepreneur or any social entrepreneur would also have. So this is where we are in 2025. Next slide, please, Arya. And in terms of cumulative metrics, we as a team have implemented more than 250 small, medium, large-sized projects with around 100 clients, mainly coming from Lebanon, Jordan, and the Gulf. And you can see that it's such a diversified portfolio of clients. Lebanese public sector, Jordanian public sector, clients from Saudi Arabia, from the UAE, and a lot of development organizations and UN agencies from Lebanon and Jordan. And this has been really a success. However, I cannot say that we've reached the peak. We are still working towards sustainability. We'd like to grow our impact, and we'd like to also be innovative in terms of finding solutions for the various crises we are in. But you learn from bumping into a wall, you learn from rising, and you try to adjust with all the circumstances you live in. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you, Marianne. And I noticed you mentioned the word crazy a few times, and I'd love, I know Jacqueline will have some observations in the area that she is going to sort of speak about, which is how, the operating environment and who your partners are can really either stifle or support an ability to really think and act differently. So really being a maverick with real social impact. And I'd love to just connect with the last slide that you showed us, which was around really 89 client organizations, and UNICEF is just one of those. It really seems like this new model and the evolution that you took has really helped to kind of expand the reach, the ability and agility of BOT. Is that the case?
So just to clarify, UNICEF was a donor, a partner, and now a client. So UNICEF Lebanon has been, and UNICEF Jordan, they've been playing and wearing different hats. So first as providing a grant, initiating an idea, and then a partner who believes, who supports, who mobilizes resources, and then a client who believes in your services, the quality of your services, the value you provide. And this is why they decide to work with you and not another, competitor of ours, because we have other service agency in Lebanon, but of course, other than, having them contributing to the establishment of the organization, but it's also about quality and price, right? At the end of the day, they need a service, and there's a competition in the market. So that has been the role of UNICEF, evolving throughout the journey. It's all about, Lebanon is a small country. I cannot say that it might work in other countries. It's really based on the context itself. Word of mouth is important. Your credibility is important. The team's credibility is important. And in some cases, you start small. You start with a low ticket budget with an organization, and then they become your recurring clients. And this is what's important. Working with the same client several times based on their needs, rather than just working with one client, messing up and then stepping out. So credibility is such an important element, and it's about the work you deliver, but also the trust they have in you. They need to trust you as a person, they need to trust the team, and it's a partnership because we're also a social enterprise.
Exactly. Exactly. What advice or encouragement would you give, Marianne, to others who might be working with initiatives that are delivering, tremendous impact and value, but that are at this moment perhaps almost, fully grant funded? How do they start to evolve their thinking and explore a different model? What is that first couple of steps that people might take to explore and maybe end up where you are, and in what sort of period of time might they be the people that we want to highlight this positive experience for?
So first of all, for me, the most important thing is they should be risk takers. So if you work in a humanitarian agency, you depend on grants. So your competitive edge is the design of the project and the quality, and it's not your sustainability. And in order to move from a fully grant funded project to, I'm not going to say directly fully, right, starting to have a plan to reduce the percentage, you need to take the risk, and you need to live a bit a schizophrenic life, because when you work in an NGO, you have a different mindset. And then suddenly, yes, you are a social enterprise, but it's a company, right? It's a for-profit company, and you need to think about revenue. You need to be aggressive in the market. You need to diversify your services. You need to follow the market, understand what the market needs, and adjust rapidly, especially we're in the tech field. So you need to innovate, and you definitely need to take a risk to say no for grants. We were tempted in so many cases, and I have my founder with me, Shadwell. In so many cases, we were tempted. Let's take this grant. Let's pitch in this innovation fund. But we're like, no. I mean, we want to be the independent. We don't want to take it the easy way. We want to be less. We want to put ourselves in a position where we're squeezed, right? Like, we need the fund, but go find your clients rather than go find your grants or your donors. So I think risk-taking is very important, and always pushing yourself not to be in the comfort zone. You don't need to be in your comfort zone. You have to, it's an adventure, right? But the thing is, you have people depending on you. So you have team members, you have a team depending on you. At the end of the day, they're employees, they need their salaries, they're contributing to their household income. And this is where responsibility kicks in. So what do I do? Do I take the easy way, or do we challenge each other to be aggressive and look for clients, identify ways to partner with new clients rather than chasing grants?
Oh no, that's really super, Marianne. I mean, thank you so much. So what I also heard, along with the risk taking, the mindset, and the responsibility, piece, is how important it is to say no. And I think even people who are fully in initiatives that are grant funded sit with that. How do you ever say no? Because the connection point between resources and results is it's almost a linear kind of, there's a direct correlation. And so what I'm taking away, tell me yes or no, is it's really important to know what your value proposition is. If you're going into the market to either, provide this service that someone like a UNICEF would go for, or the other clients are, it's really important to know what it is you deliver and why, and where you do not, or else perhaps the risk is being led by the money, and then you're never really as solid possibly in what your core value proposition services or products might be. Sort of what? Yes, no?
It is a yes. And I add to it, sometimes you would mobilize your current limited resources to grant requirements. So you'll be busy following grant requirements, regulations, and we all know, donor agencies are quite demanding these days, and you suck your energy and your resources on grants, and you won't have any more resources to work on the market and the client and the sales and business development. So this is where, yes, you sometimes need to say no because your resources are limited. Use them well, use them efficiently.
That's super. And thank you so much, Marianne. We really appreciate you being so open to sort of share your experience. And, I think we all wish we could bottle some of that, vivacity, enthusiasm, and commitment to both, the financial sustainability and the social impact. Thank you so much to BOT. And just to do a sort of a pre-advertisement, you mentioned, Marianne, that the University of Cambridge, the Judge Business School team that Arya was a part of, actually worked together with colleagues, doing a whole bunch of in-depth interviews and pulling together lots of evidence. And there is going to be kind of a teachable case study, an article, various resources that we will also be sharing out in the coming weeks. So, in addition to this interaction, there'll be a lot of those resources. And thank you to the BOT team. Terrific. So we are going to switch to our next panelist, our next panel member, and that is really focused on another business model entirely around government integration. And it is one of the more widely applied ones in the development and social sector, but it also has a whole range of similar as well as very different context-specific considerations. So we're delighted to have Ravi Tejabale join us from the Upshift team. This is also work that was supported by the University of Cambridge and at the Judge Business School, along with other key colleagues from UNICEF who have accompanied Upshift since its early scaling journey. And really, this case study provides us valuable insights on how government integration has been an effective choice in some contexts, especially when you're looking to scaling up to influence policies, systems, and institutions. So this is not only about scaling out to more geographies and to more users and young people, which it does, but really around the kind of elements of sustainability that are systems changing and systems influencing. And that kind of those sorts of aspects around how a business model can really drive into adoption and continuing utility. So Ravi, over to you to take us through your experience, which I know for the Upshift initiative really spans 80 plus countries, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Tanya and Arya, for the connected conversation. This is a great opportunity for a lot of people to learn what's happening across the globe within UNICEF and also outside the UNICEF supported programs. So I'll quickly begin with what is Upshift and then probably deep dive into how we've been integrated the program into government system and how government took complete control and ownership of the program, which is run specially in India. So Upshift is a social innovator accelerator for young people, which rapidly unlocks their potential to create real and tangible change and solution in their lives, not only in their lives, but also in their communities. It specially focuses on solving social problems. So Upshift is designed based on these 7 principles. To begin with, the main core is the social purpose. Then it builds a strong agency among young people to tackle problems within their community, and which is packed with human-centered design and design thinking and problem-solving skills embedded in it with experiential learning, which gives them real-world experiences and also embed those experiences, which is again connected to a strong mentorship and bring them to work in a team, which also increases their team bonding and also bring their learning outcomes. In the end, it will put them with a final problem which they've solved with a solution into a challenge mode where they can participate into many programs or challenges across the globe, across the country by solving real world problems. So if you look at Upshift is currently in 56 countries and we are scaling to 13 more countries, plans to expand in different other countries. And if you look at the key figures here globally, like 5.2 million graduated on Upshift and 145 million learning hours. And if you look at, I just wanted to focus on this slide, 24 results, 2024. If you look at 2.1 million children, young people reached and 1.1 million graduated on Upshift. This is really, really important. And this is only from the 2 countries where we've launched the blended delivery model. This was only possible with a strong government agency, government partnership, and government integration, especially the government ownership towards the program and hand-holding the program as their own and implementing it across the country. And I'll probably covering more about that when I come to the India part. But if you look at different country integration models, which are highlighted here for your quick view, India, so what we have done is it's here teacher delivered, and it's part of extracurricular activities where students learn upshift. And Bhutan, it's accredited as part of the formal curriculum. And Maldives, if you look at teacher delivered extracurricular activity, Vietnam accredited as extracurricular activity. In Uganda, if you look at, it's part of TVET, vocational education and training. And in Albania, it's accredited as in-service teacher training. These are different models. And also there are so many other models which other countries are adapting and integrating upshift into formal or informal or extracurricular into the education system, because it's very, very important for government education systems to take control and take this program as an important element. Now, coming to India demographic dividend, if you look at, we have 420 million youth population, and 29% of the total population is youth, and 28.8% is a median average age. If you look at the key opportunities, so we have the largest youth workforce globally, and youth economic contribution is approximately 34% of the GNI. And if you look at the digital technology adoption, it's very, very important. 77% smartphone penetration among youth is there. And if you look at the growing education access, is 34.3%. Now, coming to the key challenges. So youth unemployment is the biggest challenge, and skill gap is also another biggest challenge, and education quality disparities are the big challenges. So this is where Upshift comes with a very, very good blended model to probably overcome these challenges. And that's where we will look at the next slides on how we are going to, how India achieved this and try to solve these problems. So if you look at this slide, so there are key government partners who are highlighted here. So AIM, Atal Innovation Mission, is a body which looks at only innovation, and they have 10,000 tinkering labs across the school. And this year they have a mandate of increasing them to 50,000 tinkering labs across the country. And Ministry of Education is one of the key partner who's running the program. And AICT, All India Council of Technical Education, is also one key government partner who is part of the program. Now, if you look at, there are 6 steps which are involved in Upshift delivery, especially in India, where every step we looked at the government involvement. First is the state level capacity building, where all the state nodal officers are capacity built. We have 28 states and 8 union territories. And the next important person in the program is teacher. So there is a strong teacher capacity building which happens on Upshift. And after teacher capacity building is done, then students are onboarded onto a platform. There is a dedicated platform built which has an LMS, learning management system, and a challenge management system, where students come, learn, complete a 27 hours of Upshift course, and then go and start submitting their project or solution which they have identified based on the problem. And the fourth is district level boot camps. After they have a solution ready, they move to the district level boot camp to probably start prototyping their solution and building their solution on top of it. And next is the state level boot camp. After district level boot camp, few teams are moved to state level, where they have a detailed boot camp to build a real-time prototype. And the last is incubation support. This is very, very important, where in India, government is funding and also supporting those innovations which is coming out of the students to start those initiatives and start those solutions implementing at wherever the real problems are. So if you look at what value is it going to deliver, these are the values which are delivered to adolescent and youth. And at the systemic level, these are very, very important, which is providing government to take ownership of the program and the platform. It's very affordable and tech-enabled scale, and it has a very detailed dashboard, and it's completely open source and strong advocacy tool for youth capabilities and cross-learning from geography pilots. So this is what makes it very, very important for government to own it. And if you look at the journey to the million, this is where I'll spend some time on how it all started as a pilot in one state. And in 2020, 2021, with one state piloting the program with the technology, and then looking at the solutions. If you look at 49,000 students participated that year, and 9,000 schools were involved. From there to 2023, 22-23, 4 states we piloted this program, where 300,000 plus students were engaged and 24,000 teachers were trained. And 23-25, this is a very, very important aspect of the program, where it's not only scaled to a national level, but the entire application, platform, technology, and the program is completely owned by the government now. From the initial start point to the end point. When I say end point, it's not about just ideas submitted on the portal, but owning the platform itself. The platform is now hosted at the heart of the ministry server, where it is run by the ministry, program is run by the ministry with the technical support of UNICEF, and also the ideas, the solutions which are coming out of the students are completely owned by the government, funded, and probably supported them for scale. And the program is now called as India's largest school-based skilling and innovation program. It's called School Innovation Marathon. Yeah, so if you look at, you might be thinking, why social? Because if you look at all the solutions, we have highlighted very finger few solutions here, where we have mapped to different SDGs linked. So all the solutions which students are submitting, I mean, most of them fall under any of the SDGs. When they are selecting the problem category, we give them a category to select which problem are they going to solve and which SDG is it going to be part of, so that it is aligned in the dashboard and the government counterparts can also see. You can look at different solutions here which are part of SDGs. And here are three solutions which I want to talk about, where government not only supported for prototype, started using the prototype which is built solution in the school. So the first one is there is a midday meal concept in India, where a large meals are provided for all the students across the school, where 200, 300,000 students will be there. It makes it very difficult to hold a container and go. So that's where students designed this prototype, where there are wheels and you can put a gas stove beneath this, and then the food is cooked, then you can pull the trolley and serve the food. And the second one, and the government schools, it is implementing this model now, and it funded by the government. And the second, if you look at the groundnut shells or peanut shells, the student came up with peanut shell pots, which are biodegradable. And the municipal corporation in one of the state has owned this idea and started funding and using those pots. And the third one is really important. A student got a 1 million funding from the government, where he solved a problem of street lights, where every street light they have to go and turn it off. That's where the student designed a box where all the street lights are connected with one button, everything turns off, which saves electricity. These are different models which are supported by the government, where students' ideas are encouraged and supported. To summarize, so the first important element is strategic alignment, where we need to align with the priorities and the policies which are already there as part of the government. And here in India, we have a national education policy, which is a very strong integration of upshift into national education policy, which is there. That is first important point of government integration. And second is direct implementation. A lot of solutions, what happens is they start small and they don't have a lifetime where they die down. This is where we look at building it with the government, having a long-term vision, not short-term, where we do independently without government. That's where direct implementation with government involving them is very, very important. Third is capacity development, which is very important element which any government, especially the education network, needs to capacity build their teachers or the nodal officers on upshift. That was a very important move for us to integrate it. And next is co-development. We have co-developed the entire thing with respect to platform, dashboards, and rolling out the program and planning. Everything was co-developed with them. And the last is system integration. As I mentioned, the complete program is now plugged into government systems, including the technology we have built, which has LMS and CMS, is now hosted on government servers, where government is running the entire program, including the platform. So this is where I want to summarize how it's structurally, methodically, we have integrated this program in India, and now it's handed over to the government to take care of the program, which is impacting millions of youth to go through upshift and also start solving problems in their communities and coming up with great solutions, which are not only solutions, but are adopted by the government and funded and also scaled. Thank you very much, Tanya.
Super. Thank you, Ravi. I'm going to save some of my questions for our Q&A session and remind the audience as well to please continue to drop your Q&A in the Q&A box. But one question I wanted to come back to you on, Ravi, is just to remind ourselves, India, huge, as you mentioned, like a really huge country with a huge number of young people states, just the scale of India is very large. However, the government integration model is one that has been applied really to a number of countries across different continents. So you've mentioned India, huge, complex, massive scale, but also Bhutan, also the Maldives, Vietnam, Uganda, Albania. I think we have 4 continents covered so far in those examples. So it really is, it doesn't only take a country like India with those kinds of resources. You really can be pursuing this model with various types of governments at different scale of population, and different compositions. What would you say is the kind of one thing in kind of common that has really encouraged those countries and those governments to want to adopt this? Because as you pointed out, there might be different types of adoption into the curriculum, into teacher training, or wholesale into the government budgets, because this is where governments are putting their own resources, whether it's the time, the training, the servers, the cost. So there is a cost implication. So they really do need to believe that that is worthwhile doing, and it's not something they would be doing, for a month. It's something that is a really long-term commitment. Why?
Yeah, so if you look at Tanya, so I outlined it in the presentation as well, where when you are thinking long term. So, and also we are trying to look at what the problems are the country or the government is currently facing. And that's where Upshift is trying to bring that blended approach to upskill the youth of the country or the students of the country to be ready to solve different problems. And unemployment is not only growing in India, but also across the globe. If you look at unemployment is a big problem to handle. That's where you need a lot of micro entrepreneurs to bud in and then start their ventures and start employing them. Not only one micro entrepreneurs, but also starting a lot of solving different problems which are around. If you look at India, there are so many problems to be solved that makes government that why don't we educate all our children to start solving problems rather complaining about the problems to a teacher. In a school, we are taught about don't come with a problem, come with this, we are not encouraged to discuss problems. That's where Upshift makes students to be comfortable discussing the problems, identifying the problems, and how do you solve the problem. That is a very, very important 21st century skill. And also the education policies across the globe is now looking at 21st century skill as a very, very important element to be integrated. That's where Upshift blends in very smoothly to address that problem and brings in the concepts of design thinking, human-centered design to enable students to look at problem as an activity or a fun thing to solve it, not probably identify from a problem. That's what make it very, very strong.
Thank you, Ravi. And yeah, I mean, as I said, we'll come back to more questions from the audience and from pre-submitted ones from the audience at the end. But I don't want to hold back from moving to our next and final speaker, Dr. Jacqueline Mies-Bus from the University of New South Wales Business School, and to immediately give a shout out to Jacqueline, for whom it is now past midnight. But I think if we have to talk about, what does it take to make these things work? Commitment beyond the extraordinary. So thank you so much, Jacqueline. UNICEF Nodes have been working with the University of New South Wales Business School to explore business model barriers to growth that affect innovative enterprises that aim to improve lives, especially for children, and do so at scale. So Dr. Mies-Bus, along with the support from Dr. Sonia Rial, have uncovered operating layers, different sorts of unseen but critical elements that are actually barriers to be overcome, and that we don't or haven't previously given enough thinking to. Also, I think Jacqueline is going to sort of speak more about, you've heard Marianne talk about that kind of being schizophrenic, about being a risk taker, but also needing to have responsibility. There are so many competing, concerns that founders face, and there's a certain hybridity to balancing commercial viability with mission-driven goals, and really how to address these various sources of friction, but with a completely new and novel take on the space. So Jacqueline, please, over to you.
Thank you, Tanya. And I must say, you took a risk putting me last, but yeah, I'll try to sound awake. Maybe next area. Yeah, so we've been looking together with UNICEF and with the venture fund to what are these barriers to growth, right? And Tanya already just gave what's the definition to scaling social impact. Next thing is we want to say that we found that many of these innovative new tech enterprises produce technological solutions that can accelerate social impact, but they usually do so indirectly. So they're like the accelerator in a larger system, but they're not the deliverers of social value themselves. And to understand that, we say to contribute to social impact, they actually need to collaborate at another level with other actors that form what we've defined as the collective social value creating system. It's not just an ecosystem. It's not just a random group of people because it's very structured. Yeah. How do we deliver, let's say, internet access to all schools around the world for children? That's a system of collaboration between commercial entities, NGOs, governments or government institutions, funders, etc. And all of these actors, as Marianne in her story was saying as well, they come with different mindsets. They're different types of beasts, right? They have a different logic, different goals, and different business models. So business models for social impact through these innovators need to be understood, we said, as dual layered. First of all, that new enterprise, that business model needs to duplicate to grow and to be sustainable, financially sustainable. But at the same time, they need to embed themselves in that larger system and collaborate with that system to really create the innovation. So you see two layers of scaling. And if you talk to organizations like UNICEF, they say scaling, when we talk about scaling, we talk about multiplying the social impact through that collective social value creating system. But as soon as we started talking to the innovators, we found that they're different, right? These enterprises, for them, scaling was profitably multiplying the technological solution. And that could be a product or process or code or sometimes, like I think in Marianne's example as well, more like getting more consulting hours. But then the next step is, in order to sell, they also need to adapt to and be adopted by a larger collective social value creating system. So next slide, yeah. So we developed an analytical framework where we said, let's go and look at a number of these enterprises and then look at them at these two levels. Let's first look at what are the barriers that they encounter when they try to duplicate their own value proposition, whatever it is, their product, their code, their whatever. And then we're going to look at that system and see how complicated is it for an innovation like this to get integrated into that system. Who's in the system? How complex is it? What would be the role of the enterprise in it? How disruptive is the innovation? That's really a critical point often as well. And in both areas, we were looking at what blocks or what accelerates the growth, the scaling of the impact. We can skip that, I think, as Tanya already spoke about that business model and Osterwalder and how it's about value creating, delivering, and capturing. But as I'm saying, the enterprise is doing that, the system is doing that. So if we first look at that first level, multiplying the business model of the innovation, the innovative new enterprise, one thing we found is that founders of technology startups are almost all primarily technology driven. They enjoy solving problems with technology and look for problems that match their technological expertise, not the other way around. So they're not social entrepreneurs that have a mission-first approach. Maybe some do, but the ones we spoke to were primarily technology developers. These founders, they display different and shifting degrees of social commercial hybridity, of how important the social part of their business is or the commercial part of their business is. And we saw that shift as well. So, for example, one of them started out being very socially oriented, but then found that there wasn't that much money to be earned there. And as Marianne was saying as well, they needed to balance that with more commercial clients. And as they did so very successfully, that part of the business grew so much that eventually they were actually taken over by a big tech company, a global company. And the social part of the business became very small. So the other thing is to survive and thrive, they need a healthy and sustainable business model. But what that is often co-determined by that larger system, the collective social value creating system to which they contribute. So one of our respondents said, it's not always in the startup's hands to determine the business model. And I think he's very right. And what he was referring to, he was doing a blockchain and wanted to put together a vaccine ledger. He was in India, very close to the pharmaceutical manufacturers. And he thought that the business model was that these manufacturers, the providers of the vaccines, were going to pay him a little contribution, maybe a few cents for every vaccine safely and efficiently delivered to the beneficiary. But that was not the business model at all. It turned out, to be very different. I'll come back to that. And these routines and habits in those systems, those small enterprises can't change. They have to adopt to them, even if that's not very good for them. So we saw there were actually 3 types of models from these enterprises, 3 ways of reproducing themselves, that make and sell products, as well as the sell by the hour. The third one mostly spoke about the need for hybridity, the need to find commercial clients that could kind of sponsor their social work, that could balance their income. But then there are also the developers of often solutions for complex problems, and like the vaccine ledger provider. And they offer problem solutions as an all-inclusive package, paid when the milestones or the project is achieved. Now, this usually involves competitive tendering, and this is important because some of you may be involved in that. That tendering process is a very high risk for social entrepreneurs. It's low risk for the contractor, high risk for the new enterprise, because and especially if the solution is less standardized and the complex system in which they need to integrate is more complex and political. They need to take a big risk on coming up with a price, and then it usually costs more and they can't carry all that. So big risk. Actually, one of the people we spoke to, one of the founders said he'd never do that again. So we try to visualize a bit what we mean by, they need to be embedded into that larger system. So if you can show the next slides, Arya. Here's one that provides a new channel in the big system. But to do that, they need to deal with intermediaries, who deal with beneficiaries, mission funders, service providers, etc. It's a complex network that they need to be embedded into. The next one we spoke to was a provider of a blockchain solution that actually covered the whole system. Now, to be accepted by all of them, we may say, great, blockchain, it offers transparency, it offers more clarity and responsibility in the whole system. It democratizes the whole system. But that's not necessarily what every player in that system is very excited about. Some actually feel very threatened by it. So it's not easy to get in there. And then the last one was providing great data solutions. The next one, Arya, that gave insight to policymakers and mission funders of where to best spend their money. But actually, that was very difficult to sell because there are not that many policymakers they could sell this to. And at that stage, it's not easy to calculate what the benefit was going to be. So again, they had their own barriers to entering the system. So overall, I could talk about these companies for way too long, so we won't do that. The overall insight, I think, and hopefully takeaway for you is that the small enterprises, they need to grow and multiply themselves, but they also need to do that within a larger system. And we need to understand both and where they fit in to see what the barriers are and how these can potentially be removed. And that cannot always be done by the enterprise itself. They may need help from other people in the system. So to summarize the key barriers on the next page, Arya. The structural barriers in the venture business model, I'll especially lift out the first one. The key one is lack of hybridity. If there's not enough hybridity, cross-subsidization between social customers and commercial customers, they tend to struggle. Yeah, they need to find that balance. Also, when the deployment is very resource intensive, that can be very difficult for small enterprises. And when their social product is not integrated with their core business, to then keep it up, it's just too much work, and it usually gets neglected. There are, however, at least as many, if not more, barriers within that larger collective social value creating systems. There are levels of resistance, especially if the level of disruption of the innovation is high. There are levels of power, but there are also these competing logics that we were talking about, right? A high impact collective social value system includes government, intergovernmental organizations, and they operate according to an institutional logic of let's reduce the risk, standardize as much as we can, formal compliance. And this is completely opposite to how they operate. The responsiveness, experimentation, relationship based alliances. And indeed, as Marion was saying as well, they're saying we live risk. And then we deal with this larger organization and system that says no risk, avoid risk. We also see that a lot of them are not directly dealing with the beneficiary, and that can also sort of thwart their intrinsic reward a bit, and it can make it more difficult to keep the social mission up. So this is just some of our findings to date. And yeah, I hope we can continue this conversation and dive deeper into this and to really understand that two-layeredness of how we're going to remove the barriers for the innovators and accelerate growth. Thank you.
And that's an excellent point, Jacqueline, because we have a couple of questions from the audience on exactly this kind of what are the barriers and how can different pieces of that landscape be aware of those and act to address them. I have a pre-question before we dive into the Q&A and just sort of encouraging people to get their questions in before we turn to answering them. But Jacqueline, why did we miss this two-layeredness? I mean, the hybridity we've seen, say talked about or referenced, but the fact that there are, it's almost, I don't know, a nested sort of situation where you might kind of be focused or maybe refocusing on where you are and what your own business model is, which was where we started our conversation and our kind of panel discussion today with work that we asked, Australian National University to look at, which was the business model. And why we ended with you was that, well, that's not enough because it's a business model within a business model that's interacting with others that are not the same. Everyone has different contexts, different incentives, different gearing and speed, etc. So I guess, why hasn't this been something that is more focused on? It does seem like somewhat of an aha. And where does that take us to? What sorts of, questions or things can we do better with this?
Well, first of all, I think this is what often happens, and this is why, why we do this kind of research, because we started seeing the tensions, and what is it? And the other thing that made us see it was that we realized they were not really social entrepreneurs. They were contributing to social outcomes. And like with a lot of these things, the very simple things that are like a new pair of glasses can stare us in the face. But then once we discover them, we think, yes, of course. It's, of course, the world is round. And of course, this is the issue. And we also started seeing it when we realized that some of these companies, we were always talking about entrepreneurs who go to these sort of deep, the valley of death, and I need to creep out again. But we thought that's not enough. That's not just it. They face all these other barriers, and some of them they can't remove because they don't have the power. And I think this is where organizations like UNICEF, UN, other social organizations with more power and better government connections can actually help them, because they need that help.
Well, super. And I think we want to throw a number of questions out now to all of our panelists. And, Arya, I'm throwing this out to you as well to address, given that you're kind of representing the work from the ANU team. There is kind of an overall theme in a couple of questions. And I was actually just one-on-one messaged by someone in a health tech startup who said, you once said context is king, and I hear this is what I'm hearing, from this panel, that is true and that remains true. And I'd love to hear a reflection, maybe Ravi, starting with you, and Jacqueline and Arif, if there's anything that you see is relevant from the other work, is how, we have initiatives that are either one initiative across multiple contexts, or, unfortunately, Marianne had to move to a separate meeting, but, we have a very specific context for BOT that is kind of scaled regionally. But again, it doesn't matter which sort of way you look at this, the context of that, the place in which you're implementing, working, and seeking to build out your business model, there is one. How do you see that influencing the choice of a business model? And Ravi, there was a question around, how do you sort of understand, or when is a country context ripe for business integration, and when is it not? And Jacqueline, to you, you've just laid out, using that landscape, a way of understanding and being aware of that context. How does that help us think through, that yes, you've looked at one business model, but almost anyone who's looking to understand what they should consider, or if they're looking at alternatives. So Ravi, I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, Tanya. So the first thing is probably so when does you look at the government, and how do you integrate the programs or the models you have with the government? There are a few things which I want to talk about. The first thing is, don't think long term, which I also repeated earlier. It has to be a long term, and it should not be a short term project. And you should always look at co-designing it with the government, and also with the relevant partners, and then probably building the solution from scratch with them and identifying the problem. And then the third, I also spoke about the capacity building. Prioritize capacity building, and next is prove value beyond impact. Its cost, scale, and sustainability are very, very important metrics. And also the important element here is find a champion inside the government system, like the department which is heading innovation, the department now in our program, so Atal Innovation Mission, who anchors the innovation work in India. So they were our array of light, and also AICT, who also supports student innovation. So these are identifying the champion inside the system, which would probably bring this program's long way. And the last one is not abandoning the grant if there is a grant, but probably so go with it and start building it. And what governments will be interested mostly so with the work we are doing with multiple countries. The first thing is ownership and sustainability. So there has to be an ownership angle to it, and also a sustainability lens to it, which they would definitely look at. And the second is policy alignment. Is there a strong policy alignment, whether it sits into the existing policy, and can it go smoothly with the policy, so that they can also start integrating into the budgets? Because when it is part of the policy, the budget's allocation for the government becomes very easy, because budgets is one key thing whenever we are looking at program at scale, so that it'll be very, very swift. And third is cost efficiency. How do you reduce costs? So this is where we also look at different models. If you look at most of the technology products, whenever there's a high usage, the biggest cost is server space. How do you optimize it? How do you look at effective cost utilization? They're probably bringing in third-party servers for free, or probably looking at optimizing the solution to host it on the government servers, or cost efficiency. And next is data-driven governance. So the government now wants data at one site. like where they can look at like what's happening across different solutions. And there are specific government departments where they're building dedicated dashboards to monitor everything, because everything is connected to tech. And so probably like a look at data-driven governments where your solutions will be part of giving a lot of data points to government on how things are functioning and how things are shaping up and how the problems are being solved. So that's again a very, very real, important element. And next is strengthening public delivery system. So this is again the last and very important thing, which we'll also have to look at. How do you strengthen the existing public delivery system? If you look at the education system, especially I'm talking about the Upshift. So how do you strengthen using Upshift, the entire system, and try to make it more strong use case for them to use it and reuse it and start building it and probably solving the problem which the government really has. So this is what I think the government looks at. But probably if you're looking at probably opting out of the government, Tanya, you're telling something? Oh, so if you want to probably like so opt out of the government and like I say that, okay, I have a solution, but I don't want to like probably look at the government, then absolutely like so there's no solution fits every problem. Like that's where you can probably look at if your solution needs speed and agility. And so you want to build it very fast and you're very agile about it, then probably the government partnership is not ready for you. And probably second, lack of policy and system readiness. Suppose there is no policy in the government for your solution and probably there is no system readiness in the government, then probably like you have to rethink on the government integration. And the third is too early in product lifecycle. Suppose you have an idea and only at a product stage, probably idea stage, not a full-blown product, then probably you should probably rethink of probably integrating it and then think of integration. And the fourth one is high touch premium things also like so might not be feasible. And last is your solution doesn't align with public priorities. So your solution definitely has to align with the current public priorities and the problems which the communities are facing. So that's when you will have to probably look at this. And also regulatory and political risks. If the political risks are too high, then probably government integrations might not be swift and it's not advisable to look at an integration. And also the government is a stakeholder. So if it's not a stakeholder and if it's not the owner, then also like it might be very difficult.
That is really helpful because I think it's a very fulsome picture of this. One quick question, if you can give us a quick answer to, was a question that who maintains, so this is very specific, that you mentioned there's the learning management system, yes, or the core technology. And so we had a question about who maintains that. So who, even if this is now embraced, embedded, it's on the government servers, etc. Who's maintaining the core code?
Yeah. Exactly. So if you look at technology, any technology solutions, two things are in common. One is the building cost, and here the solution is already built. So it's only the maintenance and the hosting cost because it has to be hosted on a server. And so now if you look at most of the governments, not only India government, a lot of government has their government servers which are already there in place. And in India case, or also like a couple of other countries where they're ready to host if there is a solution which is going to help and probably fill in the gap, then the governments are hosting it. In India case, they are hosting it in their servers, and also the maintenance is done by them. Probably there are some patchwork to be done, some updates to be done, which the government is doing. And also like an alternate, which also like everyone should start looking at is the common solutions which are already part of the government system. If you look at Google Classroom, or probably Microsoft solutions, which are already there across different government institutions, which are part of the government and hosted there, supported by external party. If can we probably look at building our solution as an integration model to it, that will save a lot of cost, time, and also efficiency, and also main importantly, the data points for the government. So these are the things which we are following here. But the straight question is government is owning the entire hosting and the maintenance cost here.
Super. Thank you, Ravi. Let me turn to you, Jacqueline, back to that question around context. And actually wanted to acknowledge that, by unpacking this, you've actually given us almost a tool. You're sharing a tool or a conceptual framework of actually thinking around context. But please, over to you.
Yeah, so I was thinking as Ravi was talking, you can conceptualize that and saying we need to try to find, and we were talking about that in one of our previous meetings, that some form of mapping that system. Who's in there? Who are the players? How is value created? How is value delivered? How is value captured in the larger system? And who are the different players in that whole system? And then look at your innovation at an early stage to see how would that fit in. Because we've spoken to 2 of the 3 cases that we looked into, actually got that a bit wrong at the start. And then needed to mold their business model to fit the larger system. And that was not always easy. And one succeeded maybe better than the other. So to make them aware of that at an early stage and help them map that could be, I think, a great way of taking away some of the barriers.
That is super. And actually, Ari, I'm going to turn to you to ask a question that was not the question I asked, but it is one that was asked by participants before they joined. It's one that connects to just what Jacqueline was saying, was, to give people tools, concepts, ways of thinking through the space. And one of the key areas that you're working on as part of the Innovation Node team is, how do we bring together, and again, this is the start of work that we think that's just really useful and important. How do we turn this into a useful, practical tool for people who are actually, faced with, I have an initiative, I'm working in this way. How do I, how do I know whether it's, option 1, 2, 3, 5, there's many different business models, right? This is just a start. How can we turn that into something practical for people to be able to use? And when we say people, just to be clear, there was a question earlier about open source. We consider this part of that knowledge that we are committed to sharing out with, anyone, to be able to be more effective, more sustainable, etc. Over to you, Arya.
Okay, and I think Jacqueline would agree with me on my statement. From the management and business literature, there is no lack of framework or system or strategy that people could use to actually map which business model and how to innovate them that is best for their context. So there is already a lot of that framework. However, as the work from ANU team has discovered, that some of the existing framework simply didn't consider the elements that need to be considered in the social impact world. For example, even the discovery of the Jacqueline's team on there is an existence of what we call the collective social value system, in which that is where the value is actually created when you're dealing with social impact. It's not only fall on the business itself to actually deliver the social impact. So I think what we're working on with the Innovation Nodes team is basically, we're going to be developing some toolkits that could actually be used within this context, which come from, basically, it will be rooted in the existing literature of how we can innovate a business model. However, we will do some tweaking based on the learning that we have from ANU work, based on the learning from UNSW work, to fit it better into this context, because there has never been a lack of academic literature or research on how to do business model innovation. It's just that there are adjustment and refinement that we need to do to make sure that it is relevant for this context, because as we can see, the discussion about business model is actually contextual. It's contextual to the situation, it's contextual to the goal, it's contextual to the country, it's contextual to the market. So the toolkit that we will be developing basically is going to take into account on how to recontextualize those existing framework and breaking it down into a step-by-step guide on, okay, first of all, these are the questions that you need to answer. After you answer these key questions, how can you actually think about visualizing or conceptualizing your idea for a business that balancing a social impact goal versus a financial sustainability goal? So I think that's the work that is, hopefully, while we are doing this right now, more people are going to be exploring, because we do know that for based on my experience from UNICEF and my in private sector, I realized that to solve a problem, some problem can be solved by the private sector, some problem needs government integration, depending on the context. But regardless of what is the best approach for the business model, it requires money, because solving this problem, it's not going to happen if we don't have the resource to actually solve it. That's why thinking about generating revenue for this social impact approach is something that we need to be exploring more, because this is not about gaining profit for the sake of enriching people. When we say we want the business model for the social enterprise to be profitable, it's not for the goal of making the CEO rich. It's for the goal of how to make sure we have enough resources to keep operating so that more people can be helped by the solution that is delivered by the business. So I think that's what we hopefully are going to produce soon, and we will be publishing soon the business model toolkit for social innovation.
Exactly. And I think, some of this work is translational as well, because the word profit doesn't really have a place, and it's not one that we talk about. But doing good, we could talk about what is your value proposition, how do you create value? Those things are kind of in common. Sometimes these things are also separated, not only in I think profit is a fundamental bedrock concept for for-profit business models. So there is a big piece of translation work to be done. But there's also filled with jargon. Do people really use the word income and revenue in our world? Probably not. Would that be useful? Would there be some terminology and concepts that would be useful for us to think about? Yes. How do we learn from things that didn't work, or learn from failures? So we had from Marianne, her reflections on things that didn't work, things to be overcome. Jacqueline, you mentioned an experience where someone said, based on my experience, I would not do this the same way again. How do we help in pulling these experiences and, this evidence together to not only share a way forward, but to share a way where someone can come into this and not learn that their business model isn't the right one because it failed, or it was so difficult, or because they spent so much of those precious resources that Marianne was talking about pursuing a model that isn't perhaps the right one, not understanding the context is complete, understand in the context, what are those barriers that you are facing? Understand, Rav, you gave us a wonderful walkthrough, some key things, key critical success factors that you need to know. Is the answer yes? Or if it's no, can it be overcome? To really say that government integration is the right one, for you. So there is no right or wrong business model. They're just different choices. And hopefully what we'll do is really start to unpack that. It's also our idea is that, this is extensible. So we're looking out to the community to help build and contribute. We'll create a framework that others can, share and build on. But we think this is, just really an important piece of work. And we're so glad that all of you have joined today. In our last sort of minute or two, I wanted to flag up again a deep thanks to our audience for joining, and to and especially to our panelists, especially those that are now in the very wee hours of the morning, to thank you for these excellent questions, and we will be coming back to everyone with resources. We'll alert everyone to when those toolkits are available. We hope that if you are interested in contributing to that, or asking more questions, or suggesting other aspects and other models we should be looking at, please do. We are, a team that is noted for arriving at the table saying, let's tell you what we're ignorant of. There's so much that UNICEF as an institution holds the expertise in, and our expertise is we'll ask every stupid, uninformed question, but we will be ruled by the curiosity and, base that evidence on if, can we evidence that this is useful? Will this help, people actually move the needle in terms of social impact? And how do we ask, those practitioners, those governments, those experts in academia in particular, so from R&D labs, from think tanks and our academic partners, to help us to really interrogate and explain the space so that it becomes a useful tool, the type that Arya has just been unpacking. So again, thank you to everyone. Please keep watching the space. We would, please see the QR code that will lead you to where we release our resources. So as mentioned, the toolkits will be coming out in a month or two. Sooner than that will be an invitation and resources around additive manufacturing. So that would be one of those emerging science, technology, innovation spaces that for the development and humanitarian areas, there is a whole lot that's very interesting, that really holds the opportunity to help children, women in their communities during some of the worst times and dire circumstances of their lives. And we hope that to see you. Please spread the word. Please keep sort of supporting. And again, thank you for joining UNICEF's Innovation Nodes and our partners and collaborators and thought partners, which are from the Business School of the Australian National University, from the Judge Business School of Cambridge, from the Transdisciplinary School of the University of Technology, Sydney, from the University of New South Wales, and from our colleagues. We really have amazing UNICEF colleagues around the world who have contributed, and in now the new social enterprise areas that have been launched, like Marianne Bitar, the CEO and co-founder of BOT. So we thank you all and wish everyone a lovely day, and to Jacqueline, finally a chance to sleep. So thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.